I nearly always say on my tutorials to make a sample before you make the real thing. But what do you do if that sample doesn't fit perfectly? How do you go about pinning your sample and then adjusting the pattern to get it right? If you are new to my channel, I'm Ali and I've been pattern cutting and dressmaking since the early 90s. I learned in college way back before the days of YouTube and being able to learn like this. So I've been doing it a lot of years and I absolutely love pattern cutting and getting things to fit. Now I'm new to using this little microphone, so do please tell me how the audio is, if it has any kind of weird sounds, as I might knock it while I'm pinning my sample, but I want to make sure that everything is nice and clear to hear. So I quite often get questions about fitting garments on my tutorials, and I had a question from Hannah the other day about the shoulder slope on a sample, and that's one of the things that can cause problems, but it's really easy to fix. So what I'm going to do, this sample fits how I want it to. This is just a generic skirt that I sew onto all my samples. If I'm doing something like this where the skirt isn't fitted, I would definitely recommend making something like this that's just A-lined or quite full that you can use to put on any bodice samples that you're trying on, and it saves you cutting them each time, and then you can just take it off and use it on the next one. If you don't have the sample actually sewn onto the waist, it's hard to see if that waist seam is in the correct position. So that's why I do it, and that's why it's in a different fabric to my actual sample. Now I've made this out of calico, so it looks nice for this video, but to be honest, a lot of the time if I'm making something for myself, I use an old bed sheet, little scraps. They could be all different colours. It doesn't matter what you make it from, as long as you sew it accurately. That is the main thing. And the other thing is always stay stitch around your neck and armhole if you're not putting anything on it, if it's just a cut edge for a sample, because you don't want to accidentally stretch that when you're sewing your shoulder seams, when you're sewing your side seams, when you're putting it on, any of those things. So always make sure you do that stay stitching. So I'm going to run through with an ill-fitting sample that you'll see in a second and just show you how to do it. Now I can't cover every single thing. I'm trying to cover a fair bit and at least show you kind of in what order you want to be fitting your sample. And then I'll show you on the pattern how I then took the pin sample and adjusted it onto the pattern to make this. So if there's anything I haven't covered and you think would be really helpful for you, do please ask in the comments, because quite a few of my pattern cutting tutorials have come about because of questions that I get asked. So any questions that you do have or anything that you think I could elaborate on from this tutorial, do please mention it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take off this fitted sample and I'm going to put on the sample that doesn't fit at all. And I'll show you how you don't have to go back to the drawing board if this is how your sample turns out. But if you work through it step by step, you can fit your sample and then adjust your pattern. And if you're doing quite a few adjustments, you might want to make a second sample, or if it's just minor, you can then just get straight on with making your actual garment. So here's the bad fitting sample. I think you'll agree this fits really, really badly. Now I'll apologise in advance if it makes lots of noises when I'm moving it around with this microphone, but I'm trying it out because I think my voice is going to be a lot clearer, and I have a lot of cars going past, which is really annoying and it blocks them out. So do please let me know if it doesn't sound great or if it does. So where do you start when your sample fits this bad? I could understand if you just looked at it and thought, I've got to go back to the drawing board, I've got it all wrong, I can't work with this. But you don't need to. You just need to do it a step at a time. So what I tend to do is I get it perfect vertically first. So you need the bust point in the right place, you need the waist in the right place, and you need to play around with the shoulders. Once you've done that, then you can fine tune the darts, the openings, any gaping, the fit at the sides, all of those things. But getting it right vertically is really important, because if you start, for example, taking it in at the side, and then you realise that the bust point's in the wrong place, it could be too high, too low, and then you move it, then it's not going to fit at the side. So get it right vertically first. Now, I can't see in the mirror while I'm doing this, so I'm going to have to keep kind of stepping out, looking in the mirror, checking it, and then coming back. So if pins suddenly appear or move, that is going to be why. So I'll get this done as best I can while recording it, and then I will fine tune it in the mirror afterwards. So when you see me adjust it with my pattern, it will be absolutely perfect. But it's very hard to film yourself doing something like this when you can't see what you're doing. So the first thing you need to do is get that bust point in the right place. Now you could work from the waist and get that in the right place, but then it could pull the bust point up. And if you do that, you're going to have to move the side dart, you're going to have to adjust the length of this dart, it's going to pull everything off, it's going to pull the armhole too high. But if you get the bust point in the right place, and for me, because I've got this side dart, I don't know how well you can see it, but that kind of indicates to me where it should be. Now, of course, the side dart might be too high or too low, but you need to just work out with what you're making, what is the best thing to line up. So I'm going to get this bust point in the right place, and then I need to work out if I need to move my waist up or down, and the same with the shoulders, whether I need to pull them in. Now, I've made this way too big on purpose so that I can show you what to do. What I would recommend is always doing a nice big seam allowance, because if it's too small, or if you want to drop the waist down a little bit, anything like that, if you've got a small seam allowance, it's going to be really tricky. If you cut a really big seam allowance, then you can unpick it and re-pin it. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to quickly go and look in the mirror, and I need to make sure this bust point is in the right place. And I know that I'm going to have to take a bit from here because my waist is sitting too low. It's not where I want it to be. I want it to be higher up than this. And this clearly is way too big. So I'm just going to stop recording for a second, and I'm just going to have a look in the mirror and do this, because I really can't do this bit without looking. And I'll get some pins in here and then explain to you what I have done. So the first thing I did was I did the waist, and it doesn't matter if you go off at a funny angle. It's kind of hard sometimes to pin when you are looking down. So I've just pinned that across, and I've taken out, when it's folded, about 1/2 centimetre. But it doesn't matter as well if it's not even the whole way around. You can kind of take an average. If you find that on one side you've pinned 4mm where it's folded and the other side 6, then just go with 5. You want to get it as near as you can, but don't worry too much. And the same with the shoulders. I've pinned these, and they're probably not exactly the same. I mean, most people's shoulders aren't the same anyway. I know this shoulder for me sits a bit higher, probably from years of carrying bags, and that is very, very usual. If your shoulders are completely different, then you might want to adjust them independently. However, if they're only off by a little bit, I tend to say make the dress symmetrical, because if not, necklines can go a bit funny, all of that stuff. But you need to kind of judge with your own body shape whether you need to do those slightly different. So I've basically pinned these up. I've realised that I'm knocking the microphone on this side, so I'm going to try to touch this side more. So I've pinned this up, and I've pinned this here so that the waist is sitting where I want it to, and it's now the right length vertically. And from the side, you just want to make sure any side darts like this actually point to the bust point, and if they don't, you can always move them down, which is literally a case of just redrawing it slightly lower to point to the right position. But I know now that this fits vertically, and I have a very gapey side seam here. So that's the next thing I want to do. So again, I'm going to look in the mirror and do this because I can't see what I'm doing, and I can feel my way, but it's good to see exactly what I'm doing. I feel like it fits okay at the waist. It's not perfect, but it's not too bad. So I need to look at that as well. So I'm going to have a look in the mirror now, and then I will pin how I want this to fit, and then I'll show you exactly what I've pinned. So the first thing I've done is I've pinned these darts at the front. The waist was too big, but I didn't want to take it in the side here. I felt from the side like it just wasn't fitting nicely around the bust. So I've pinned those in here, and now it fits a lot better, but I still need to address this side seam because it's very, very gapey here. So I'm going to have a look now at doing that. And that's now much better. So I've not pinned it in anymore at the waist, but I've pinned it in at the top by quite a bit, so I'm not swimming in it. It fits much better. Now I don't want this really gapey at the top. So I think you'll agree now, it's starting to look so much better than when I first put it on. It's amazing the difference it makes just putting a few pins in. So it's still not right, but we're getting there. So we've basically got it fitting correctly from the waist to the shoulder. I've got my shoulder slope done, and I've now fitted it around the body, and I've made sure the darts fit right, and obviously check all the other darts as well. Now I'm concentrating on the front because it's really hard to show the back on the video, but obviously it's exactly the same principle. But what you sometimes need to do is have a look in the mirror, see how the back fits, and then take it off, pin it, and then put it back on again, because it is very hard pinning behind your back, getting it right. So that is the general fit of it, but we've still got a little way to go. So the next thing I am going to look at is how I want my openings. If I want to lower anything, all of that stuff. So before you do that, make sure all the darts are in the right place, the end points are correct, and they're the right width, and then look onto where you want your openings. So I feel like my armhole is absolutely fine. I'm happy with how that sits. other than it being a bit gapey, but I'll address that in a second. But I feel like my neck is a little bit too high, so all I tend to do is either just put a pin at the height I want it, or I just get a pen and draw it on. So I'm going to have a little look now and just get that in the right place. So I've literally just drawn a line where I want that to come down to, and that's all you need to do, because you can reshape the whole thing when it's on. But I need to address this gaping, and that's going to affect the opening as well. So we kind of work on both of those at the same time when we adjust the pattern. So the next thing I need to do is I need to get rid of all this gaping on my armhole and on my neck. And that's a really, really simple thing to do when you know how to do it. What I am going to do first is my neck, and all I need to do, what I don't want to do is just pin one big bit in the middle like this. I'm going to be, obviously on my pattern, I've got half of the pattern. So I'm going to be adjusting just one side on the pattern. I hope that makes sense. I'm trying to get the right bit here. But I want to pin 2 lines. It doesn't matter if they're not exactly the same, but you want to try and get at least the amount you've pinned at the top correct on both sides. If you're coming down quite a bit, you want it to fit close to your body at the point where your neck opening is going to be. So if you decide you want to cut it down quite a bit, when you are pinning anything for gaping, pin it at the point where your neckline is going to be. So if that's the case, I would just draw on roughly the whole neckline. So I'm going to have a look in the mirror now and pin where I feel this needs to go to fit much better. And that is how to do it. If it's only a small amount, then I would just do one lot in the middle if it's just tiny bit. But if you've got quite a lot of gaping like me, I really would recommend doing it both sides. And if you pin them slightly unevenly, all you do is you just add them both together and take the average. I will explain that when I do the pattern in a minute. So I need to now just have a little look at my armhole. It's the last little bit of gaping, so I'm going to have a look in the mirror now. I don't need to do both sides. I can just have a look at this side and get that pinned too. So that is the armhole gape pinning now done, and it fits so much better. You want to have everything fitting nice and flush, and this is why I say to put the stay stitching in, because if this stretches out, you might end up pinning these in more than you need to. If you haven't got the stay stitching on your neck, for example, it could stretch out, and then you can pin it to get it right, and you're pinning it in a little bit too much because it's stretched. So that is why it's so important to do the stay stitching, even on a sample. So that's all now done, and just like the neck, I've pinned both sides. They're not exactly the same, but I will take an average when I do it. So now that I've done that, I can see that my side dart here looks a little bit high, and it's a little bit long as well. I tend to look in the mirror and I literally just draw a line where I want the end point to be, and I look and I see how much lower I want it to be, and that's about where it looks right. So I'm just going to lower the entire dart down and just shorten it a little bit. So that is how to do the darts, but get everything else done first, because if you look at those darts before you've done everything else, they could end up moving. But now that I've got everything fitting well, even though there's loads of pins in it, I can see it fits well. I can see exactly where that side dot is. And then it just needs to go down just a tiny bit. Now that I've got all of the pins in here and I'm really happy with how it fits, and as I said, you need to do the same at the back as well, but it's kind of tricky to show in a video and I'd have to keep taking this sample off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a good look in the mirror now and make sure I'm really happy with all of this that I have done, and then when I take it off, I'm just going to even out these pins a little bit, just so it makes a little bit more sense when I'm showing you how to adjust your pattern for the sample. And then once I've done this stage, if I'm doing little tiny tweaks, I don't make a second sample. It will be absolutely fine just to start making your actual garment, but with as many tweaks as this, I would always make a second sample. If you're short on fabric, you can always unpick this and unpick the darts and just iron it out and reuse the same fabric. It just depends how much patience you've got for doing things like that. So this is how the sample looks now. You can see it a lot better now. You can see it close up. So there's obviously an awful lot of pinning. Now I can't imagine anyone's sample is going to be this far off that you're going to need this many corrections. But as I said, I made this intentionally really bad so I could show you quite a few different adjustments that you might need to do. So if you have as many as this, where do you start with your pattern? You need to do it a step at a time. You don't have to do it in the order that I do it in, but I will just run through it and show you exactly what I do. So this is my pattern here. So as I said before, I didn't do anything on the back just because it's quite hard for me to show on video pinning the back myself. And the adjustments are going to be basically the same as the front. So let's just do these one at a time. So I've got a couple of gape darts here. They need to go to the bust point. I need to adjust the side seam, the shoulder seam, the waist seam. I need to bring these darts in a bit. There's quite a few things to do. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do these gape darts. And to do those, I need to find my bust point. So the easiest way for this, and obviously every pattern is going to be a little bit different, but an easy way to do it. So I've found the centre point of each dart, and then I'm going to draw a line going from that point through the end of the dart and just past it. Now, you don't want to be pressing as hard as me when you're doing any of this, but if I don't press hard, you're not going to see it. So that is my bust point there. And the whole purpose of that is that so many things pivot around that bust point. Your darts do, any gape darts that you want to introduce, they all go around this bust point here. So now that I've found that, I can correct my 2 gape darts. So what I want to do, I know it goes all the way to the bust point, so I don't need to worry about that, but I need to know the sides at the top. So I'm going to measure both of them. So this one measures 8mm. And this one measures 8mm. If they were different, just literally add them together and divide by 2 and it will give you the average. So that's 8mm, but it's folded. So obviously the total amount is 1.6, which is double 8mm. So I need to work out where on here I want to do it. And the easiest way to do this is literally to lay your pattern on and draw a line. Now, it doesn't need to be in exactly the same point that you've done that. Just rough is absolutely fine. So I just need to do a mark, and then 1.6 centimetres is the total that I need to do a gape dart. So basically double this amount you can see. And what I need to do with both of those points is I need to join them to my bust point. And in a second, I'm going to close that up. When I close that up, obviously my pattern isn't going to lay flat, so it will affect one or both of the darts. I'll show you that in a second. So that is the neck one done. So the first thing I'm going to do is take out these pins, because once you start taking pins out of your sample, it all starts looking a little bit less overwhelming. Now, the reason I'm doing the gape dart before I'm doing the neck opening is that when I join that up, it's no longer going to be a continuous line. So that's the reason I like to do the gape darts first. So I just need to do exactly the same for this one. And it's good to do this before you adjust the side seam, because you can measure on here where the side seam is for how far across to do it. So it's roughly 10 centimetres. Again, it doesn't need to be absolutely 100%. You just need it roughly in the place where you've done it. So I'm going to do like I did on the neck. So that measures 8mm as well. And this one is 8mm. So I hadn't planned that out, but they are all the same. So I'm measuring 1.6 on here, exactly the same as what I did on the neck. And I just need to join both of those points there to my bust point. And now I need to close these up. So I'll just do that to show. Basically, what I'm doing is where I've put the dart on there, I'm putting an extra dart in here. But obviously I don't want these sewn on here, so I need to do something with that. Before I do it though, I'm going to take the pins out of here to remind myself that I have done that adjustment. So what I want to do is I want to move all of this fullness that I'm taking out into this side dart. And this is a really, really standard way of doing things. So the first thing I've done is just cut up the centre of that dart all the way to the bust point. And then for these two, I just want to cut almost to the bust point, but not quite. I need to just leave it attached by the tiniest little bit. I need to go slightly closer, because what I want to do is, oops, and now I've accidentally pulled it off. That's what I didn't want to do. What I wanted to do was leave it attached and then just swing it around. But if it comes off, it doesn't matter. So all I'm doing is I'm just moving it around to meet up with that other line. And I'm just going to fix that in place. So you can see now I've made the armhole smaller, and it's just made this dart a little bit bigger to go with it. And I need to do exactly the same with this one. And there we go. That's all of the gaping now gone. It's made this dart quite a bit bigger, so it's up to you if you want to have it all in one. Or the other thing I can do, and I would recommend it if your side dart is that much bigger than your waist dart, is I would just open up this one, and you can basically work out by doing that. These are the actual positions of this dart, not the bit that's open here. They're the seam lines basically, and the same on this one. So you can kind of work out to get them a similar size. So that's the gape darts done. That's what you need to do to get rid of any gaping and just move that to one of the other darts. But I also made these darts a little bit bigger. I didn't think it was fitted enough under the bust, so I've made those a bit bigger. So I want to draw those new lines on before I decide how I want to distribute this. So if I measure here, this measures, it looks like 8mm again. I did not do this on purpose. This one is more like 6. So I'm going to go with 7mm, which is in between the two. And again, I'm going to take those pins out so I know that I have done that. So all I need to do now on my pattern is I just need to measure 7mm either side of the original dart seam line, and I'm going to just draw those up to the bust point on both sides. Oops. And you can either rub these out, or what I sometimes do is just draw little arrows so I know which one I'm using. So now I've got both of my darts done, I can work out how much I want to put on each one, and I like to have my darts a similar width. So if I position that like that, the distance from those there and the distance between those there is kind of similar. Basically, the more similar it is, the less pointy the bust is going to appear. If you have one much bigger than the other one, or you just have one dart and you have quite a big ratio between the bust and the waist, it's going to make it look much pointier. So doing it more evenly is just a more natural way of shaping it. So that's those done. But the other thing I wanted to do was just move this dart down. So I need to redraw this dart. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fill in behind it with a little bit of paper so I can draw on here. So that's all you need to do is just stick something behind it, just fix it in a couple of places. I would definitely recommend, if you're doing this many adjustments, to eventually just trace all of this off. But as a working pattern, this is fine to use to make a second sample. So what I need to do is I need to move all of this down. It's going to get very confusing if I leave those lines there. So I'm actually going to rub them out this time. But what I want to do first is I want to move this point here. So if I measure it on my sample, it is just over 2 centimetres. And that is how far this way it's coming. I just want it shorter. I felt like it was too close to the bust point. So that is where it needs to go to. And the little line I drew on here is, it's a bit wavery, it's a bit of a wavery line, so it's hard to see. But I would say 7mm. So that point there is where I want the end of my dart to be. So I like the angle. So what I want to do, that's moved down 7mm. I want to move these down. I want to move these down 7mm either side too. So I'm just measuring 7mm down from each line. Make sure you measure the same down from both lines, because if not, your dart size is going to change. And then what I'm going to do, this one, I am going to just draw nice and easily there. And to avoid it just getting confusing and messy, I'm going to rub the previous one out. And this is why I taped that bit of paper on from behind. I don't want any tape in the way that's going to stop me from doing that. And then this one at the top, the angle is going to change. So I'm going to draw that in like this and rub out the previous line. And the reason it looks quite different is because we've opened it up as well. So this dart now, if I was to close it up, it's not going to match. So I'm going to measure from there to there, and it measures 14.2 centimetres. and this line is 14.5. So this line is slightly longer. So what I need to do is I need to adjust that side seam, but I'm also doing some adjustments on here. So I'm going to address that in a second. I'm just going to stick that together so it doesn't move around. So you don't need to do it in this order, but I feel like I want to do the side seam next so we can naturally flow on from where I've done that dart. So the best way of doing this is to fold one side of your dart, and I would always fold the top. Just make sure you do use the correct line because obviously we've been drawing various lines. And then what you want to do is fold it how it's going to be. And it's never going to lay really nice and flat because it's paper and there's tape on it and all of that kind of stuff. But that is basically how it's going to look when it's sewn up. And obviously that is no good. So what I'm going to do, you can either use a pin or I tend to just use a little bit of tape, which we can cut afterwards. And now what I can do is I can stick some tape on here and redraw in my side seam. I don't want to put too much on because it's going to stop me being able to draw it. If you're using a pen, you can draw all over this, but I never recommend doing this with a pen. So I need to work out how much I want to take this in at the top. So on here, it measures 9mm on one side and it measures 11mm on the other side. So we'll take the average, which is in between the two, and is 10mm or 1 centimetre. So I'm just going to draw 1 centimetre at the top there, and that is the position of that when I'm taking it in. And I'm not taking it in at the waist here, so I just need to draw the new side seam position in here. And this is why I didn't correct it when I did the dart, because I'm now cutting it off anyway. And if you were letting it out, you would want to do exactly the same process. So it's a case really of kind of working out what adjustments you're doing and which ones to do first so that you're really not wasting your time. If I'd have corrected this dart and then just ended up cutting it off anyway, it would be frustrating because it is just not a good use of time. So I can now just cut that exactly where that finished seam is. And then my little bit of tape that I held that with together with there, I can just trim that and open it up, and that is my dart complete. So just as I said, make sure you put little arrows so you know what's what, because it can get a bit confusing. But as soon as you've made a second sample and tried it on, I would just trace the whole thing off, because if you were to get this pattern back out in a year or so and there was lines everywhere, you just wouldn't have a clue. So that's that dart done. Now this dart, you can't see where that point is anymore. So what I'm going to do before I adjust the waist is I'm going to redraw it in. So all I'm going to do is just measure on there, and that is 17.6 centimetres. And that is obviously from this line here. So I'm just going to measure on there 17.6 centimetres, and that indicates the top of that dart. And obviously if you're adjusting that, you can just put that in the correct place. And what you can do at this stage as well, just to make your pattern a bit more stable, is just put some paper behind it to help it all stay together. So my new dart now basically goes from this point at the bottom to this point here. So if I use a red pen and I zoom in for a second, you'll be able to see basically it's going across at this point here, which is the length of the dart from my sample, and it needs to be centered on here. So that is the new bust point, and I'm going to draw this in red so you can see exactly what I mean with the dart. That is my new dart here. So it's basically wider at the bottom and exactly the same position at the top. And now I'm just going to do that with my red. So that is all the darts done. I've done my side seam, but I've not done the back. If you're doing anything on a seam that is on the front and on the back, you obviously need to do both pieces. So all I need to do is exactly the same on the back here. Just measure it at the top and then just draw in the new side seam, and then I can trim it off. Now I don't have a dart going into it on the back, so it's nice and easy. And then what you need to do Once you have done that, is just make sure that these seams are still the correct length once that dart has closed. So I'm just going to fold that back down and it still matches up there. If it doesn't, you just need to correct this so that they're the same length once the dart is sewn up. Now, apologies, I forgot that I'd zoomed in to show you the dart and I forgot to zoom back out to show you this side seam. But basically, if you couldn't see it properly, I just measured the same at the top here as what I did on the front, and it's just literally a straight line. And then you just need to make sure that they match up. And now I need to do my shoulders. So if yours has come out like mine and you've pinned it more on one side than the other, so this is the front and it's only a little bit from the seam, but I've got a lot more coming from the back. So all I'm going to do is, before I take the pins out, just draw a line. And if your shoulders aren't even, you need to kind of just take an average, but I'd pinned these evenly on myself. So I can now take those pins out, and that indicates to me how much I need to take off the back and how much off the front. So I've got 1.5 centimetres there on the back, and I've got about 4 millimetres on the front. So all I need to do, you might see a little mark on the pattern where I've started doing this because I made a bit of a mess of what I was saying, so I started again. So apologies for that. That's why there's some rubbing out. So 4 millimetres needs to come off the front and 1.5 centimetres off the back. And I've got this dart here, which changes my shoulder shape from being a completely straight line. So I need to make sure I work with that too. And then I'll show you in a second what I need to do to make sure these shoulder seams are perfect. So that's the amount I need to take off the back. That's the amount off the front. Let's put the sample aside for a second. So all I'm going to do is just trim this off. And if your shoulder seam needs extending, it's just exactly the same principle. In reverse, you just need to stick a little bit of paper on and make this slightly longer. So that is the size of the shoulder corrected. I always think the shoulder is the trickiest bit to get right. So now what I need to do, I need to make sure it matches up at the neck and the armhole, and the shoulder's basically the same length. So all I'm going to do, the same as I did at the side, I'm just going to fold that dart, and your dart might be tiny, in which case it does make it a bit trickier. I'm just going to use a bit of tape to hold that together, and now I can look at this and make sure it still matches up, and it doesn't. As you can see, it's slightly off. Let's get that right on the armhole side. So you need to just adjust these to be the same size. So what I would tend to do is I would centre it, and you can either fill in the one that's smaller or take off the one that is bigger. I am going to just shave off a tiny bit off of my back to match it up. And now I can trim that. I'm literally taking 1 millimetre off that bit. If anyone can cut out and sew within the nearest millimetre, they need an award. But it is certainly worth still doing it on your pattern to make sure it's perfect. So those now still match up, and then all I need to do is just cut that little bit of tape. Oops, making a bit of a mess of this. And just open that dart back up. And that is my shoulder seam now done. And then the last place that I've got pins is at the bottom here, and I just want to lift this up. So you can see here, when I pinned it on, this, oops, don't know what's happened there, something's got caught up. So as you can see, it's not a straight line when I did it, but all you need to do is just measure the pins and just kind of take an average measurement. So I've already done that, and the average of these are 5 millimetres, but obviously it's folded, so I need to double it. I'm taking off 1 centimetre in total. If I just show you by drawing it like that, when you take it out, that's obviously the total that you're taking out. So for me, it's 1 centimetre. So all I need to do is take 1 centimetre off all the way around my pattern at the waist seam, on the front and on the back. If yours was pinned unevenly, intentionally, because it didn't fit equally all the way around, then you obviously just need to adjust it accordingly. So if, for example, you had pinned it up a lot more at the side than there, you just need to work out where that waist seam needs to be. But hopefully yours is nice and straight and fits right. It depends if this is a block sample you are fitting, where the adjustments might be a bit more in depth, or if you are adjusting a pattern that you've made from a block, then your adjustments shouldn't be anywhere near as severe as what I'm doing. So that's my new waist seam line drawn in, and I just need to trim that off. If you've got a particularly big dart on your waist down here, I would definitely recommend just doing the same and then cutting that as one continual piece. So I'll get these trimmed off now. So there we go. That is the waist now, the correct length, and exactly the same as what I did on the shoulders. Just make sure this is now a nice continual shape. You don't want it going down to a point or anything, but that should be absolutely fine. So the last thing I need to do, I need to take these pins out for sure. That's one thing I need to do. So the last thing I need to do now, I'm not adjusting my armhole. I was quite happy with how that was once I'd done all the gaping, is I just need to adjust this neck. And as I said before, the reason I do this at the end is because when you're doing gape darts and things like that, your neck goes off a little bit. So if you draw your neck into the new shape before you do your gape dart, you're going to have to redo it. So I'm just going to literally measure that. So 16 millimeters is what I need to come down from the neck at the center front. So I'm just going to draw a line there, and then I just need to reshape it. And this is what I'm saying. You don't want to fix that and then just have to do it again when you change your neck shape. And then all I need to do for this is just cut this off. Before you cut it, make sure it is actually attached at the top. And that just has to come off there. And that is my neck opening. And obviously on the back, you need to do exactly the same. And as I said, when I was fitting it, if you're bringing your neck down quite a bit, let's just draw in, just do this very rough. I'm sure it won't be very even. But if you were, for example, scooping this out a lot, what you want to do is when you are doing any kind of gape darts like that, or if you didn't have to do that because it fit nicely at the neck, if you're bringing this down, just make sure it fits snug to your body at the point where this opening is. I don't think I've pinned that very well. So you might just need a pin down there or something like that. But I do have a separate video which explains the theory behind these gape darts that you might want to take a look at if you're opening things up by quite a bit. So that is my neck now done and my pattern complete. So just check at this stage that there's nothing that you've drawn on your pattern that you've forgotten to do, things like moving the positions of darts, changing necklines and openings on armholes, and make sure obviously there's no pins left in your sample. That's why I take them out as I do the adjustments, because then you can just have a look at the end and see if there's any pins left, anything you've forgotten. So the last thing I need to do is I need to just address this. It's gone a bit of a funny shape since I did that gape dart. It goes to a very, very slight point. So all you need to do, I would just stick a bit of paper behind it, and I wouldn't even draw this. It's very easy by eye just to recut that so you don't have that funny shape. It's just now a nice curve. So that pattern is now ready to use. If you want to just go straight ahead and make your garment from this, then that's absolutely fine. But I wouldn't dream of doing it if I did this many alterations. If you've just done a tiny bit, it's fine. If you've done this many, I would definitely make a second sample just to double check. So all I need to do now is make my new sample so I can try it on and check how it fits. And so here again is the second sample that you saw at the beginning, and this is how I want it to fit. So I really hope that this has been useful, and even if it's not the exact alterations that you might want to do, it shows you kind of in what order to do it. Because I think if you have a sample and you put it on and it just looks in the mirror like it doesn't fit at all, if you're not used to doing it, you could quite easily look at it and just think, I don't know where to start. But hopefully by me showing you the order I would do it in and then how to do that on your pattern, it's really helped. So if you've enjoyed this, do check out my other tutorials. There are several that you might find interesting, particularly my one on gape darts that I did recently, which is great if you're cutting out necklines and armholes and opening them up, and it explains why you need to add a gape dart. I would totally recommend that one. If you did enjoy this one, do please like it, share it, subscribe to my channel, all of those things, as it really helps me grow my channel. I'm really enjoying making these tutorials and I'm loving the positive feedback that I'm getting. And another way you can support me if you want to is on buymeacoffee.com. There's a link in the description. But thank you for watching this, and I really hope you have enjoyed it.